Are we here? Hello. I lost the page for a second. I panicked. Hello. What's up? Happy. Is it the third night of Hanukkah? The Hanukkah started. Yeah, it's the third night. Happy third night of Hanukkah. Cheers. My mom's watching Happiest Season in the other room, and I can hear it. I haven't watched it yet. That's why I'm saying that. Don't give me any spoilers. I swear. Oh my gosh. Alrighty. Well, we're here again. Hello. Welcome back. You know the drill. Reading the monster here. I think we only have about 26 pages that we're supposed to get through tonight, which is swell. What is that? Is that marking a page or marking? Oh. Yeah, we only have 26 pages to read tonight, and I'm very tired, so I hope that we can get through them all completely. That would be great. I'm just double checking to make sure that it is actually that amount because I planned out. Yeah, it is. Okay. Awesome. So we have 26 tonight, and then the second half will be for next time, which is about 20 pages as well. So this chapter will be quick and easy. These little parts are going to be short. All right. Let's do it. Hello, everyone. I am on page 390 at the beginning of chapter 9 for all of you that want to read along. It is called Cleaning Up. I believe it's when they clean up Beverly's bloody bathroom, so get excited. Of course, trigger warnings for everything. This is Beverly we're talking about here, so, you know, her life, and also blood and stuff is probably going to be mentioned. So, yeah, just, stay safe out there. Your discretion is advised. Discretion? Yeah, your discretion. All right, let's get into it. Chapter 9, Cleaning Up. 1. Somewhere high over New York State in the afternoon of May 29th, 1985, Beverly Rogan begins to laugh again. She stifles it in both hands, afraid someone will think she's crazy, but can't quite stop. We laughed a lot back then, she thinks. It is something else, another light in the dark. We were afraid all the time, but we couldn't stop laughing, any more than I can stop now. The guy sitting next to her in the aisle seat is young, long-haired, good-looking guy. He has given her several appreciative glances since the plane took off in Milwaukee at 2:30, almost 2.5 hours ago, with a stop in Cleveland, another in Philly, but has respected her clear desire not to talk. After a couple of conversational gambits to which he has responded with politeness, but no more, he opens his tote bag and takes out a Robert Ludlum novel. Now he closes it, holding his place with his finger, and says with some concern, "Everything cool with you?" She nods, trying to make her face serious, and then snorts more laughter. He smiles, a little puzzled, questioning. "It's nothing," she says, once again trying to be serious, but it's no good. The more she tries to be serious, the more her face wants to crack up, just like the old days. It's just that all at once I realized I don't know what airline I was on, only that there was such a great big duck on the side. But the thought is too much. She goes off into gales of merry laughter. People look around her, some frowning. "Republic," he says. "Pardon?" "You are whizzing through the air at 470 miles an hour, courtesy of Republic Airlines. It's on the KYAG folder in the seat pocket." KYAG? He pulls the folder, which does indeed have the Republic logo on the front, out of the pocket. It shows where the emergency exits are, where the flotation devices are, how to use the oxygen masks, how to assume the crash landing position. "The kiss your ass goodbye folder," he says, and this time they both burst out laughing. He really is good looking, she thinks suddenly. It is a fresh thought, somehow clear-eyed, and the sort of thought you would expect to have upon waking, when your mind isn't all junked up. He's wearing a pullover sweater and faded jeans. His darkish blonde hair is tied back with a piece of raw hide, and this makes her think of the ponytail she always wore in her hair when she was a kid. She thinks, I bet he's got a nice, polite college boy's cock, long enough to jazz with, not thick enough yet to really be arrogant. I'm sorry if you can hear the movie. I can hear it very loudly. If you can, I'm so sorry. I'll try to talk a little louder. I'll bring my laptop closer to me. She starts to laugh again, totally unable to help it. She realizes she doesn't have a handkerchief with which to wipe her streaming eyes, and this makes her laugh harder. You better get yourself under control or the stewardess will throw you off the plane, he says solemnly, and she only shakes her head, laughing. Her sides and her stomach hurt now. He hands her a clean white handkerchief and she uses it. Somehow this helps her to get it under control finally. She doesn't stop all at once though. It just sort of tapers off into little hitchings and gaspings. Every now and then she thinks of a big duck on the side of the plane and belches out another little stream of giggles. She passes his handkerchief back after a bit. Thank you. Jesus, ma'am, what happened to your hand? He holds it for a moment, concerned. She looks down at it and sees the torn fingernails, the ones she ripped down to the quick tipping the vanity over on Tom. The memory of doing that hurts more than the fingernails themselves, and that stops the laughter for good. She takes her hand away from him, but gently. I slanted in the door at the airport, she says, thinking of all the time she has lied about things Tom has done to her, and all the time she lied about the bruises her father put on her. Is this the last lie? How wonderful that would be. Almost too wonderful to be believed. She thinks of a doctor coming in to see a terminal cancer patient saying, the x-rays show the tumor is shrinking. We don't have any idea why, but it's happening. It must hurt like hell, he says. I took some aspirin. She opens an in-flight magazine again, although we probably know she's been through it twice already. Where are you headed? She closes the magazine, looks at him, and smiles. You're very nice, she says, but I don't want to talk. All right? All right, he says, smiling back. But if you want to drink to the big duck on the side of the plane when we get to Boston, I'm buying. Thank you, but I have another plane to catch. Boy, is my horoscope ever wrong this morning, he says, and reopens his novel. But you sound great when you laugh. A guy could fall in love. She opens the magazine again, but finds herself looking at her jagged nails instead of the article on the pleasures of New Orleans. There are purple blood blisters under two of them. In her mind, she hears Tom screaming down the stairwell. I'll kill you, you bitch, you fucking bitch. She shivers, cold. A bitch to Tom, a bitch to the seamstress who goofed up her important shows and took a Beverly Rogan reaming for it. A bitch to her father long before either Tom or the hapless seamstress became a part of their lives. A bitch. You bitch, you fucking bitch. She closes her eyes momentarily. Her foot, caught on a shard of perfume bottle as she fled from her bathroom, throbs more than her fingers. Kay gave her a Band-Aid, a pair of shoes, and a check for $1,000, which Beverly cashed promptly at 9 o'clock at the First Bank of Chicago in Water Tower Square. Over Kay's protests, Beverly wrote her own check for $1,000 on a plain sheet of typing paper. I read once that they have to take a check no matter what it's written on, she told Kay. Her voice seemed to be coming from somewhere else. A radio in another room, maybe. Someone cashed a check once that was written on an artillery shell. I read it in the book of lists, I think. She paused, then laughed uneasily. Kay looked at her soberly, even solemnly. But I'd cash it fast before Tom thinks to freeze the accounts. Although she doesn't feel tired, she is aware, however, that by now she must be going purely on nerves in Kay's black coffee. The previous night seems like something she must have dreamed. She can remember being followed by 3 teenage boys who called and whistled, but didn't quite dare come right up to her. She remembers the relief that washed over her when she saw the white fluorescent glow of the 7-Eleven store spilling out into the sidewalk at the intersection. She went in and let the pimply-faced counterman look down at the front of her old blouse and talked him into loaning her 40 cents for the payphone. It wasn't hard, the view being what it was. She called Kay McCall first, styling from memory. The phone rang a dozen times, and she began to fear that Kay was in New York. Kay's sleepy voice mumbled, Better be good wherever you are, just as Beverly was about to hang up. It's Bev, Kay, she said, hesitated, then plunged. I need help. There was a moment of silence, then Kay spoke again, sounding fully awake now. Where are you? What happened? I'm at a 7-Eleven on the corner of Strayland Avenue and some other street. Kay, I've left Tom. Kay, quick and empathetic and excited. Good! Finally! Hooray! I'll come get you. That son of a bitch. That piece of shit. I'll come and get you in a fucking Mercedes. I'll hire a 40-piece band. I'll take a cab, Bev said, holding the other 2 dimes in a sweating palm. In the round mirror at the back of the store, she could see the pimply clerk staring at her ass with deep and dreamy concentration. I spit. Did it land anywhere? I don't see it. We'll have to pay the tab when I get there. I don't have any money. Not a cent. I'll tip the bastard $5, Kay cried. This is the best fucking news since Nixon resigned. You get your buns over here, girl, and... She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was serious and so full of kindness and love that Beverly felt she might weep. Thank God he finally did it, Bev. I mean that. Thank God. Kay McCall is a former designer who married rich, divorced richer, and discovered feminist politics in 1972, about 3 years before Beverly first met her. At the time of her greatest popularity or controversy, she was accused of having embraced feminism after using archaic, chauvinistic laws to take her manufacturer husband for every cent the law would allow her. Bullshit, Kay had explained to Beverly. People who say that stuff never had to go to bed with Sam Cockowizz. 2 pumps and a tickle and a squirt. That was old Sammy's motto. The only time he could keep it up for longer than 70 seconds was when he was pulling out. The only time he could keep it up for longer than 70 seconds was when he was pulling off in the tub. I didn't cheat him. I just took my combat pay retroactively. She wrote 3 books, one on feminism and the working woman, one on feminism and the family, one on feminism and spirituality. The first 2 were quite popular. In the 3 years since her last, she'd fallen out of fashion to a degree, and Beverly thought it was something of a relief to her. Her investments had done well. Feminism and capitalism are not mutually exclusive, thank God, she had once told Bev. Now she was a wealthy woman with a townhouse, a place in the country, and 2 or 3 lovers, virile enough to go the distance with her in the sack, but not quite virile enough to beat her at tennis. When they get that good, I drop them at once, she said. And although Kay thought this was a joke, Beverly wondered if it really was. Beverly called a cab. When it came, she piled into the back with her suitcase, glad to be away from the clerk's eyes, and gave the driver Kay's address. She was waiting at the end of her driveway, wearing her mink coat over a flannel nightgown. Pink fuzzy mules with gray pom-poms were on the feet. Not orange pom-poms, thank God. That might have sent Beverly screaming into the night again. The ride over to Kay's had been weird. Things were coming back to her, memories pouring in so fast and so clearly that it was frightening. She felt as if someone had started up a big bulldozer in her head and begun excavating a mental graveyard that she didn't even know was there. Only it was names of bodies that were turning up, names she hadn't thought of in years. Ben Hanscom, Richie Tozier, Greta Bowie, Henry Bowers, Eddie Kasprak, Bill Dembrow. Especially Bill, stuttering Bill, they'd called him. What about Mike and Stan, anyways? They'd called him that with openness of children that is sometimes called candor, sometimes cruelty. It seemed so tall to her, so perfect, until he opened his mouth and started to talk, that was. Names, places, things that happened. Alternately hot and cold, she remembered the voices from the drain, and the blood. Like, Mike was on that call to her, and she doesn't think of his name? Anyways. She had screamed, and her father had popped her one. Yeah, her father. Tom. Cheers threatened. And then Kay was paying the cab driver and tipping him big enough to make the startled cabbie exclaim, "Thanks, lady! Wow!" Kay took her into her house, got her into the shower, gave her a robe when she got out, made coffee, examined her injuries, mercurochromed her cut foot, and put a band-aid on it. Mercurochromed. Thank you, Rent. Mercurochromed her cut foot and put a band-aid on it. She poured a generous dollop of brandy into Bev's second cup of coffee and hectored her into drinking every drop. Then she cooked them each a rare strip steak and sautéed fresh mushrooms to go with them. All right, she said. What happened? Do we call the cops or just send you to Reno for to do your residency? I can't tell you much, Beverly said. It would sound too crazy. But it was my fault, mostly. Kay slammed her hand on the table. It made a sound on the polished mahogany like a small caliber pistol shot. Bev jumped. Don't you say that, Kay said. There was a color on her cheeks, and her brown eyes were blazing. How long have we been friends? 9 years? 10? If I hear you say that it was your fault one more time, I'm going to puke. You hear me? I'm going to fucking puke. It wasn't your fault this time, or last time, or the time before, or any of the times. Don't you know most of your friends thought that sooner or later he'd put you in a body cast, maybe even kill you? Beverly was looking at her wide-eyed. And that would have been your fault, at least to a degree, for staying there and letting it happen. But now you're gone. Thank God for small favors. If you don't sit there with half your fingernails ripped off and your foot cut open and belt marks on your shoulders and don't you sit there with half your fingernails ripped off and your foot cut open and belt marks on your shoulders and tell me it was your fault. He didn't use his belt on me, Bev said. The lie was automatic, and she was so deep in shame which brought out a miserable flush to her cheeks. If you're done with Tom, you ought to be done with the lies as well, Kay said quietly. And she looked at Bev so long and so lovingly that Bev had to drop her eyes. She could taste salt tears in the back of her throat. Who do you think you're fooling? Kay asked, still speaking quietly. She reached across the table and took Bev's hands. The dark glasses, the blouses with high necks and long sleeves, maybe you fooled a buyer or two. But you can't fool your friends, Bev. Not the people who love you. And then Beverly did cry, long and hard, and Kay held her, and later, just before going to bed, she told Kay what she could, that an old friend from Derry, Maine, where she had grown up, had called and had reminded her of a promise she made long ago. The time to fulfill the promise had arrived, he said. Would she come? She said she would, and the trouble with Tom had started. What was his promise? Kay asked. Beverly shook her head slowly. I can't tell you that, Kay, much as I'd like to. Kay chewed on this and then nodded. All right, fair enough. What are you going to do about Tom when you get back from Maine? And Bev, who had begun to feel more and more that she wouldn't be coming back from Derry ever, said only, I'll come to you first, and then we'll decide together, okay? Very much okay, Kay said. Very much okay, Kay said. It's okay? It's okay. It's okay. Sorry. Is that a promise too? As soon as I'm back, Bev said steadily. You can count on it. And she hugged Kay hard. With Kay's check cash and Kay's shoes on her feet, she had taken a Greyhound north of Milwaukee, afraid that Tom might have gone out to O'Hare to look for her. Kay, who had gone with her to the bank and the bus depot, tried to talk her out of it. O'Hare's lousy with security, dear. With security people, dear, she said. You don't have to worry about him. If he comes near you, what you do is you scream your fucking head off. Beverly shook her head. I want to avoid him altogether. This is the very way to do it. Kay looked at her shrewdly. You're afraid he might talk you out of it, aren't you? Beverly thought of the 7 of them standing in the stream of Stanley and his pieces of broken Coke bottle glinting in the sun. She thought of the thin pain as he cut her palms lightly on a slant. She thought of them clasping hands in a children's circle, promising to come back if it ever started again. To come back and kill it for good. No, she said. You can't talk me out of this. But he might hurt me, security guards or not. You didn't see him last night, Kay. I've seen him enough on other occasions, Kay said, her brows drawing together. That asshole walks like a man. He was crazy, Bev said. Security guards might not stop him. This is better, believe me. All right, Kay said reluctantly. Bev thought with some amusement that Kay was disappointed that there was going to be no confrontation, no big blow-off. Cash the check quick, Beverly told her again, before he can think to freeze the accounts. He will, you know. Sure, Kay said. If he does that, I'll go see the son of a bitch with a horsewhip and take it out on the track. You stay away from him, Beverly said sharply. He's dangerous, Kay. Believe me, he was like my father was what trembled on her lips. Instead, she said, it was like a wild man. Okay, Kay said. Be easy on your mind, dear. Go keep your promise and do some thinking about what comes after. I will, Bev said. But that was a lie. She had too many other things to think about. What had happened the summer when she was 11, for instance. Showing Richie Tozier how to make his yo-yo sleep, for instance. Voices from the drain, for instance. Something she had seen, something so horrible that even then, embracing Kay for the last time by the long silvery side of the grumbling Greyhound bus, her mind would not quite let her see it. Now as the plane with the duck on the side begins its long descent into the Boston area, her mind turns to that again, and to Stan Eurus. But what about Mike? And an unsigned poem that came on a postcard, and the voices. And those few seconds which she had been eye to eye with something that was perhaps infinite. She looks out the window, looks down, and thinks that Tom's evil is a small and petty thing compared to the evil waiting for her in Derry. If there is a compensation, it is that Bill Denbrough will be there. And there was a time when an 11-year-old girl named Beverly Marsh loved Bill Denbrough. She remembers that postcard with the lovely poem written on the back, and remembers that she once knew who wrote it. She doesn't remember any more than she remembers exactly what the poem said, but she thinks it might have been Bill. Yes, it might well have been stuttering Bill Denbrough. She thinks suddenly of getting ready for bed the night after Richie and Ben took her to see those 2 horror movies. After her first date, she'd cracked wise with Richie about it. In those days, that had been her defense when she was out on the street. But a part of her had been touched and excited and a little scared. It really had been her first date, even though there had been 2 boys instead of 1. Richie had paid her way and everything, just like a real date. Then afterward, there had been those boys who chased them, and they'd spent the rest of the afternoon in the Barrens. And Bill Denbrough came down with another kid, she couldn't remember who. She remembered the way Bill's eyes had rested on hers for a moment, and the electric shock she had felt, the shock and the flush that seemed to warm her entire body. She remembers thinking all these things as she pulled on her nightgown and went into the bathroom to wash her face and brush her teeth. She remembers thinking that it would take a long time to get to sleep that night because there was so much to think about, and to think about in a good way because they seemed like good kids, like kids you could maybe goof with and maybe even trust a little bit. That'd be nice. That'd be, well, like heaven. And thinking these things, she took her washcloth and leaned over the basin to get some water, and the voice, too, came whispering out of the drain. Help me. Beverly drew back, startled, the dry washcloth dropping onto the floor. She shook her head a little, as if to clear it. Then she bent over the basin and looked curiously at the drain. The bathroom was at the back of their 4-room apartment. She could hear faintly some Western program going on the TV. When it was over, her father would probably switch over to a baseball game or the fights, then go to sleep in his easy chair. The wallpaper in here was a hideous pattern of frogs on lily pads. It bulged and swayed over the lumpy plaster beneath. It was watermarked in some places, actually peeling away in others. The tub was rust-marked, the toilet seat cracked. One naked 40-watt bulb jutted from a porcelain socket over the basin. Beverly could remember vaguely that there had once been a light fixture, but it had been broken some years ago and never replaced. The floor was covered with linoleum, from which the pattern had faded, except for a small patch under the sink. Not a very cheery room, but Beverly had used it so long that she no longer noticed what it looked like. The wash basin was also water-stained. The drain was a simple, cross-hatched circle about 2 inches in diameter. There had once been a chrome facing, but that was long gone. A rubber drain plug on a chain was looped nonchalantly over a faucet marked C. The drain hole was pipe dark, and as she leaned over it, she noticed for the first time that there was a faint, unpleasant smell, a slightly fishy smell coming from the drain. She wrinkled her nose a little in disgust. Help me, she gasped. It was a voice. She had thought perhaps a rattle in the pipes, or maybe just her imagination, some holdover from those movies. Help me, Beverly. Alternate waves of coldness and warmth swept her. She had taken the rubber band out of her hair, which lay spread across her shoulders in a bright cascade. She could feel the roots trying to stiffen. Unaware that she meant to speak, she bent over the basin again and half whispered, Hello? Someone there? The voice from the drain had been that of a very young child who had perhaps just learned to talk. But in spite of the goose flesh on her arms, her mind searched for some rational explanation. It was an apartment house. The Marshes lived in the back apartment on the ground floor. There were 4 other apartments. Maybe there was a kid in the building amusing himself by calling into the drain. Some trick of sound. Is someone there? She asked the drain in the bathroom, louder this time. It suddenly occurred to her that if her father happened to come in just now, he would think her crazy. There was no answer from the drain, but that unpleasant smell seemed stronger. It made her think of the bamboo patch in the Barrens and the dump beyond it. Called up images of slow, bitter smokes and black mud that wanted to suck the shoes off your feet. There were no really little kids in the building. That was the thing. The Tremonts had a boy who was 5 and girls who were 3 and 6 months. Mr. Tremont had lost his job at the shoe shop on Tracker Avenue. He got behind the rent, and one day not long before school let out, they all disappeared in Mr. Tremont's rusty old power-flit Buick. There was a Skipper Bolton in the front apartment in the second room, but Skipper was full. There was Skipper Bolton in the front apartment on the second floor, but Skipper was 14. We all want to meet you, Beverly. Her hand went to her mouth and her eyes widened in horror. For a moment, just for a moment, she believed that she had seen something moving down there. She was suddenly aware that her hair was now hanging over her shoulder in 2 thick sheaves, that they dangled close, very close to that drain hole. Some clear instinct made her straighten up quick and get her hair away from there. She looked around. The bathroom door was firmly closed. She could hear the TV faintly, Cheyenne Bodie warning the bad guy to put the gun down before someone got hurt. She was alone, except of course for that voice. Who are you? She called into the basin, pitching her voice low. Matthew Clements, the voice whispered. The clown took me down here in the pipes and I died. Pretty soon he'll come and take you, Beverly. Ben Hanscom and Bill Denbrough and Eddie. Her hands flew to her cheeks and clutched them. Her eyes widened. She felt her body growing cold. Now the voice sounded choked and ancient, and it still crawled with corrupted glee. You'll float down here with your friends, Beverly. We all float down here. Tell Bill that Georgie says hello. Tell Bill that Georgie misses him, but he'll see him soon. Tell him Georgie will be in the closet some night with a piece of piano wire to stick in his eye. Tell him. The voice broke up in a series of choking hiccups, and suddenly a bright red bubble backed up the drain, and popped, spraying beads of blood in the disdained porcelain. A choking voice spoke rapidly now, and as it spoke, it changed. Now was the voice of the young child that she had heard first. Now was a teenage girl's voice. Now, horribly, it became the voice of a girl Beverly had known, Veronica Grogan. Veronica was dead. She'd been found dead in a sewer drain. I'm Matthew. I'm Betty. I'm Veronica. We're down here, down with the clown, and the creature, and the mummy, and the werewolf, and you, Beverly. We're down here with you, and we float, we change. A gout of blood suddenly belched from the drain, splattering the sink and the mirror and the wallpaper and its frogs and lily pads pattern. Beverly screamed, suddenly and piercingly. She backed away from the sink, struck the door, rebounded, clawed it open, and ran for the living room where her father was just getting to his feet. What the Sam Hill's wrong with you? He asked, his brows drawn together. The two of them were here alone this evening. Bev's mom was working the 3 to 11 shift at Green's Farm, Derry's best restaurant. The bathroom! She cried hysterically. The bathroom, Daddy, in the bathroom! Was someone peeking at you, Beverly? Huh? His arm shot out, and his hand gripped her arm hard, sinking into the flesh. There was concern in his face, but it was predatory concern, somehow more frightening than comforting. No, the sink, the... She burst into hysterical tears before she could say anything more. Her heart was thudding so hard in her chest that she thought it would choke her. Al Marsh thrust her aside with an "Oh, Jesus Christ, what's next?" expression on his face as he went to the bathroom. He was in there so long that Beverly became afraid again. Then he bawled, "Beverly, you come in here, girl." There was no question of not going. The two of them had been standing on the edge of a high cliff, and he told her to step off. "Right now, girl." Her instinct of obedience would almost certainly have carried her over the edge before her rational mind could have intervened. The bathroom door was open. There her father stood, a big man who was losing the auburn hair he passed on to Beverly. He was still wearing his gray fatigue pants and his gray shirt. He was a janitor at the Derry Home Hospital, and he was looking hard at Beverly. He did not drink, he did not smoke, he did not chase after women. I got all the women I need at home, he said on occasion, and when he said in a particular secretive smile, and when he said it, a peculiar secretive smile would cross his face. It did not brighten it, but did quite the opposite. Watching that smile was like watching a shadow of a cloud travel rapidly across a rocky field. They take care of me, and when I need it, I take care of them. And when they need it, I take care of them. Now just tell me, oh my gosh, I can't read. Now just what the Sam Hill is all this foolishness about? He asked as she came in. Beverly felt as if her throat had been lined with slate. Her heart raced in her chest. She thought that she might vomit soon. There was blood on the mirror, running in long drips. There were spots of blood on the light over the sink. She could smell it cooking onto the 40-watt bulb. Blood ran down the porcelain sides of the sink and plopped in fat drops on the linoleum floor. "Daddy," she whispered huskily. He turned to her, disgusted with her, as he was so often, and began to casually wash his hands in the bloody sink. Good God, girl, speak up. Good God, girl, speak up. You scared the hell out of me. Explain yourself, for Lord's sake. He was washing his hands in the basin. She could see blood staining the gray fabric of his pants where they rubbed up against the lip of the sink. And if his forehead touched the mirror, it was close. It would be on his skin. She made a choked noise in her throat. He turned off the water, grabbed a towel on which 2 fans of blood from the drain had splashed, and began to dry his hands. She watched, near swooning, as he grimed blood onto his big knuckles, on the lines of his palms. She could see blood under his fingernails with marks of guilt. Well, I'm waiting. He tossed the bloody towel back over the rod. There was blood everywhere, and her father didn't see it. Daddy. She had no idea what might have to come next, but her father interrupted her. I worry about you, Elmarsh said. I don't think you're ever going to grow up, Beverly. You go out running around, you don't do hardly any of the housework around here, you can't cook, you can't sew. Half the time you're off in a cloud someplace with your nose stuck in a book, and the other half you've got vapors and megrims. I worry. His hand suddenly swung and spatted painfully against her buttocks. She uttered a cry, her eyes fixed on this. There was a tiny stipple of blood caught in his bushy right eyebrow. If I look at that long enough, I'll just go crazy. None of this will matter, she thought dimly. I worry a lot, he said, and he hit her again, harder, on the arm above the elbow. That arm cried out and then seemed to go to sleep. She would have a spreading yellowish purple bruise there the next day. An awful lot, he said, and punched her in the stomach. He pulled the punch at the last second, and Beverly lost only half of her air. She doubled over, gasping, tears starting in her eyes. Her father looked at her impassively. He shoved his bloody hands in the pockets of his trousers. You have to grow up, Beverly. Oh, no. You got to grow up, Beverly, he said, and now his voice was kind and forgiving. Isn't that so? She nodded. Her head throbbed. She cried, but silently. If she sobbed aloud, started what her father called that baby whining, he might go to work on her in earnest. Almarsh had lived his entire life in Derry and told people who asked, sometimes those who did not, he intended to be buried here, hopefully at the age of 110. No reason why I shouldn't live forever, he sometimes told Roger Orlett. Cut his hair once each month. I have no vices. Now explain yourself, he said, and make it quick. She swallowed, and it hurt because there was no moisture in her throat, none at all. There was a spider, big fat black spider. It crawled out of the drain, and I guess it crawled back down. Oh! He smiled a little at her now, as if pleased by this explanation. Was that it? Damn, if you told me, Beverly, I never would have hit you. All girls are scared of spiders. Sam Hill, why didn't you speak up? Bent over the drain, she had to bite her lip to keep from crying out a warning. And some other voices spoke deep inside of her, some terrible voice which could not have been part of her. Surely it was the voice of the devil himself. Let it get him if it wants him. Let it pull him down. Good fucking riddance. She turned away from that voice in horror. To allow such a thought to stay for even a moment in her head would surely damn her to hell. He peered into the eye of the drain. His hands squelched in the blood on the rim of the basin. Beverly thought grimly with her gorge. Her belly ached where her dad hit her. Don't see a thing, he said. All these buildings are old, Bev. Got drains the size of freeways, you know it? When I was janitoring down in the old high school, we used to get drowned rats in the toilet bowls once in a while. It drove the girls crazy. He laughed fondly at the thought of such female vapors and megrims. I don't know how to say that word. Megrims? Mostly when the Kenduskeag was high. Less wildlife in the pipe since they put up the new drain system, though. I feel like I don't have a Maine accent for him. Oops, sorry. He put an arm around her and hugged her. Look, you go to bed and don't think about it anymore, okay? She felt her love for him. I never hit you when you didn't deserve it, Beverly, he told her once, when she had cried out that some punishment had been unfair. Surely that had to be true, because he was capable of love. Sometimes he would spend a whole day with her, showing her how to do things or just telling her stuff or walking around town with her. When he was kind like that, she thought his heart would swell with happiness until it killed her. She loved him, and tried to understand that he had to correct her often because it was, as he said, his God-given job. Daughters, Almarsh said, need more correction than sons. He had no sons, and she felt vaguely as if that might be partially her fault as well. Okay, Daddy, she said. I won't. They walked into her small bedroom together. Her right arm now ached fiercely from the blow it had taken. She looked back over her shoulder and saw that the bloody sink, bloody mirror, bloody wall, bloody floor, the bloody towel her father had used and then hung up casually over the rod. She thought, how can I ever go in there to wash up again? Please, God, dear God, I'm sorry if I ever had a bad thought about my dad, and you can punish me for it if you want. I deserve to be punished. Make me fall down and hurt myself, or make me have the flu like last winter when I coughed so hard that I threw up. But please, God, make the blood be gone in the morning. Pretty please, God. Okay? Okay? Her father tucked her in as he always did, and kissed her forehead. Then he only stood there for a moment in what she would always think of as his way of standing, or perhaps of being, bent slightly forward, hands plunged deep to above the wrist in his pockets, the bright blue eyes in his mournful basset hound's face looking down at her from above. In later years, long after she stopped thinking about Derry at all, she would see a man sitting on a bus, maybe standing at a corner, and with his dinner bucket in his hand, shapes of men, sometimes seen as day closed down, sometimes seen across Water Tower Square in the noon light of a clearly windy autumn day, shapes of men, rules of men, desires of men. Or Tom, so like her father, when he took off his shirt and stood slightly slumped in front of the bathroom mirror to shave. Shapes of men. Sometimes I worry about you, Bev, he said, but there was no trouble or anger in his voice now. He touched her hair gently, smoothing it back from her forehead. The bathroom is full of blood, Daddy, she almost screamed then. Didn't you see it? It's everywhere. Could have gone to the light up over the sink even. Didn't you see it? But she kept her silence as he went out and closed the door behind him, filling her room with darkness. She was still awake, still staring into the darkness when her mother came in at 11:30 and the TV went off. She heard her parents go into their room and she heard the bed springs creaking steadily as they did their sex act thing. Beverly had overheard Greta Boeing tell Sally Mueller that the sex act thing hurt like fire. No nice girl ever wanted to do it. At the end of it, the man pees all over your bug, Greta said, and Sally had cried, "Oh, yuck, I never let a boy do that to me." It hurt as badly as Greta said. Then Bev's mother kept the hurt to herself. Bev had heard her mom cry out once or twice in a low voice, but it hadn't sounded at all like a pain cry. The low creak of the springs speeded up to a beat so rapid it was just short of frantic, and then stopped. There was a period of silence, then some low talk, then the sound of her mother's footsteps as she went to the bathroom. Beverly held her breath, waiting for her mother to scream or not. There was no scream, only the sound of water running into the basin. That was followed by some low splashing. Then the water ran out of the basin with its familiar gurgling sound. Her mother was brushing her teeth now. Moments later, the bed springs in her parents' room creaked again as her mom got back into bed. 5 minutes or so after that, her father began to snore. A black fear stole over her heart and closed her throat. She found herself afraid to turn over onto her right side, her favorite sleeping position, for she might see something looking in the window at her. So she just lay on her back, stiff as a poker, looking up at the pressed tin ceiling. Sometime later, minutes or hours, there was no way of telling, she fell into a thin, troubled sleep. Ten more pages. My eyes hurt because my light's so bright. All right. 3. Beverly always woke up when the alarm went off in her parents' bedroom. She had to be fast because the alarm no more than got started before her father banged it off. She dressed quickly while her father used the bathroom. She paused briefly, as she now almost always did, to look at her chest in the mirror, trying to decide if her breasts had gone any bigger in the night. She had started getting them late last year. There had been some faint pain at first, but that was gone now. They were extremely small, not much more than spring apples, really, but they were there. It was true. Childhood would end. She would be a woman. She smiled at her reflection and put a hand behind her head, pushing her hair up and sticking her chest out. She giggled a little girl's unaffected giggle and suddenly remembered the blood spewing out of the bathroom drain the night before. The giggle stopped abruptly. She looked at her arm and saw the bruise that had formed there in the night, an ugly stain between her shoulder and elbow, a stain with many discolored fingers. The toilet went with a bang and a flush. Moving quickly, not wanting him to be mad with her this morning, not wanting him to even notice her this morning, Beverly pulled on a pair of jeans and her Derry High School sweatshirt. Then, because it could no longer be put off, she left her room for the bathroom. Her father passed her in the living room on his way back to his room to get dressed. His blue pajama suit flapped loosely around him. He grunted something at her, but she didn't understand. "Okay, Daddy," she replied, nevertheless. She stood in the front of the closed bathroom door for a moment, trying to get her mind ready for what she might see inside. At least it's daytime, she thought, and that brought her some comfort. Not much, though. She grasped the doorknob, turned it, and stepped inside. 4. That was a busy morning for Beverly. She got her father his breakfast: orange juice, scrambled eggs, Al Marsh's version of toast. The bread hot, but not really toasted at all. He sat at the table, barricaded behind the news, and ate it all. Where's the bacon? Gone, Daddy. We finished it yesterday. Cook me a hamburger. There's only a little bit left of that. The paper rustled, then dropped. His blue stare fell on her like weight. What did you say? He asked softly. I said right away, Daddy. He looked at her a moment longer. Then the paper went back up, and Beverly hurried to the refrigerator to get the meat. She cooked him a hamburger, mashing the little bit of ground meat that was left in the icebox as hard as she could to make it look bigger. He ate it reading the sports page, and Beverly made his lunch: a couple of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, a big piece of cake her mother brought home from the Greens farm last night, a thermos of hot coffee, heavily laced with sugar. You tell your mother I said to get this place cleaned up today. You tell your mother I said to get this place cleaned up today, he said, taking his dinner bucket. Looks like a damn old pigsty. Sam Hill. I spend the whole day cleaning up messes over to the hospital. I don't need to come home to a pigsty. You mind me, Beverly. Okay, Daddy, I will. He kissed her cheek, gave her a rough hug, and left. As she always did, Beverly went to the window of her room and watched him walk down the street. And as she always did, she felt a sneaking sense of relief when he turned the corner, and hated herself for it. She did the dishes and then took the book she was reading out on the back steps for a while. Lars Therminius, his long blonde hair glowing with its own serene inner light, toddled over from the next building to show Beverly his new Tonka truck and the new scrapes on his knees. Beverly exclaimed over both. Then her mother was calling her. They changed both beds, washed the floors, and waxed the kitchen linoleum. Her mother did the bathroom floor, for which Beverly was profoundly grateful. Elfrida Marsh was a small woman with graying hair and a grim look. Her lined face told the world that she had been around for a while and intended to stay around a while longer. It also told the world that none of it had been easy, and she did not look for an early change in the state of affairs. My cat's scratching at the door and we let her out. I'll be right back. Alrighty. Will you do the living room windows, Bevy? She asked, coming back into the kitchen. She changed into her white dress uniform. I have to go up to St. Joe's in Bangor to see Cheryl Tarrant. She broke her leg last night. Yeah, I'll do them, Beverly said. What happened to Mrs. Tarrant? Did she fall down or something? Cheryl Tarrant was a woman Elfrida worked with at the restaurant. She and that no-good she's married to were in a car wreck, Beverly's mother said grimly. He was drinking. You want to thank God in all your prayers every night that your father doesn't drink, Bevy. I do, Beverly said. She did. She's going to lose her job, I guess, and he can't hold one. Now tones of grim horror crept into Elfrida's voice. I'll have to go on the country, I guess. I'll have to go on the county, I guess. It was the worst thing Elfrida could think of. Losing a child or finding out you had cancer didn't hold a candle to it. You could be poor, you could spend your whole life doing what she called scratching. But at the bottom of everything, below even the gutter, was a time when you might have to go on the county, drink the work sweat from the brows of others as a gift. This, she knew, was a prospect that now faced Cheryl Tarrant. Once you got the windows washed and take the trash out, you can go play for a little while if you want. It's your father's bowling night, so you want to fix his supper. But I want you in before dark. You know why. Okay, Mom. My God, you're growing up so fast, Elfrida said. She looked for a moment at the nubs in Beverly's sweatshirt. Her glance was loving but pitiless. I don't know what I'm going to do around here once you're married and you have a place of your own. I'll be around for just about ever, Beverly said, smiling. Her mother hugged her briefly and kissed the corner of her mouth with her warm, dry lips. I know better, she said. But I love you, Bevy. I love you too, Mama. You make sure there aren't any streaks on those windows when you're done, she said, picking up her purse and going to the door. If there are, you'll catch that blue devil from your father. I'll be careful. As her mother opened the door to go out, Beverly asked in a tone she hoped was casual. Did you see anything funny in the bathroom, Mom? Elfrida looked back at her, frowning a little. Funny? Well, I saw a spider in there last night. Crawled out of the drain. Didn't Daddy tell you? Did your dad get angry at you last night, Bevy? No, I told him a spider crawled out of the drain and it scared me, and he said sometimes they used to find drowned rats in the toilets at the old high school because of the drains. He didn't tell you about the spider I saw? No. Oh. Well, it doesn't matter. I just wondered if you saw it. I didn't see any spider. I wish we could afford a little new linoleum for that bathroom floor. She glanced at the sky, which was blue and cloudless. They say if you kill a spider, it brings rain. You didn't kill it, did you? No, Beverly said. I didn't kill it. That's a freaking cool line right there. Her mother looked back at her, her lips pressed together so tightly they almost weren't there. You sure your dad wasn't angry with you last night? No. Bevy, does he ever touch you? What? Beverly looked at her mother, totally perplexed. God, her father touched her every day. I don't get what you... Never mind, Elfrida said shortly. Don't forget the trash. And if those windows are streaked, you won't need your father to give you the blue devil. I won't. Does he ever touch you? Forget. And be in before dark. I will. Does he? Worry an awful lot. Elfrida left. Beverly went to her room again and watched her around the corner and out of view, as she did her father. Then, when she was sure her mother was well on her way to the bus stop, Beverly got the floor bucket, the Windex, and some rags from under the sink. She went to the living room and began on the windows. The apartment seemed too quiet. Each time the floor creaked or the door slammed, she jumped a little. When the Bolton's toilet flushed above her, she uttered a gasp that was nearly a scream. And she kept looking toward the closed bathroom door. At last she walked down there and drew it open again and looked inside. Her mother had cleaned in here this morning, and most of the blood which had pooled under the sink was gone. So was the blood on the sink's rim. But there were still maroon streaks drying in the sink itself, spots and splashes of it on the mirror and on the wallpaper. Beverly looked at her pale reflection and realized with sudden, superstitious dread that the blood on the mirror made it seem as if her face was bleeding. She thought again. What am I going to do about this? Have I gone crazy? Am I imagining it? The drain suddenly gave a burping chuckle. Beverly screamed and slammed the door, and 5 minutes later her hands were trembling so badly that she almost dropped the bottle of Windex she used to wash the windows in the living room. 5. It was around 3 o'clock that afternoon, the apartment locked up and the extra tea tucked snugly away in the pocket of her jeans, when Beverly Marsh happened to turn up Richard's Alley, a narrow walk-through which connected Main and Center Streets. He came upon Ben Hanscom, Eddie Kasprack, and a boy named Bradley Donovan pitching pennies. Hey, Bev, Eddie said. Get any nightmares from those movies? Nope, Beverly said, squatting down to watch the game. How do you know about that? Haystack told me, Eddie said, jerking a thumb at Ben, who was blushing wildly for no good reason Beverly could see. What movies? Bradley said, and now Beverly recognized him. He had come down to the Barrens a week ago with Bill Denbrough. They had speech class together in Bangor. Beverly more or less dismissed him from her mind. If asked, she might have said he seemed somehow less important than Ben and Eddie, less there. A couple of creature features, she said to him, and Duck walked closer until she was between Ben and Eddie. You pitchin'? Yes, Ben said. He looked at her quickly, then looked away. Who's winning? Eddie, Ben said. Eddie's real good. She looked at Eddie, who polished his nails solemnly on the front of his shirt, and then giggled. Can I play? Okay with me. Eddie said. You got pence? She felt in her pocket and brought out 3. Geez, how dare you go out of the house with just a wad? Eddie asked. I'd be scared. Ben and Bradley Donovan laughed. Girls can be brave too, Beverly said gravely. A moment later, they were all laughing. Bradley pitched first, then Ben, then Beverly. Because he was winning, Eddie had lasties. They tossed the pennies toward the back wall of the Center Street drugstore. Sometimes they landed short, sometimes they struck and bounced back. At the end of each round, the shooter with the penny closest to the wall collected all 4 pennies. A few minutes later, Beverly had 24 cents. She had lost only a single round. Girls cheat, Bradley said, disgusted, and got up to go. His good humor was gone. He looked at Beverly with both anger and humiliation. Girls shouldn't be allowed to. Ben bounced to his feet. It was awesome to watch Ben Hanscom bounce. Take that back. Bradley looked at Ben, his mouth open. What? Take it back. She didn't cheat. Bradley looked from Ben to Eddie to Beverly, who was still on her knees. He looked at Ben again. You want a fat lip to match the rest of you, asshole? Sure, Ben said, and suddenly a grin crossed his face. Something in its quality caused Bradley to take a surprised, uneasy step backward. Perhaps what he saw in that grin was a simple fact that after tangling Penny Bowers and coming out ahead not once but twice, Ben Hanscom was about to be terrorized by skinny old Bradley Donovan, who had warts all over his hands, as well as that cataclysmic lisp. Yeah, and then you all gang up on me, Bradley said, taking another step backward. His voice had picked up an uncertain waver, and tears stood out in his eyes. All a bunch of cheaters. Just take back what you said about her, Ben said. Never mind, Ben, Beverly said. She held out a handful of coppers to Bradley. Take what's yours. I wasn't playing for keepsies anyway. Tears of humiliation spilled over Bradley's lower lashes. He struck the pennies from Beverly's hand and ran for Center Street, ran for the Center Street end of Richard's Alley. The others stood looking at him, open-mouthed. With safety within reach, Bradley turned around and shouted, You're just a little bitch, that's all. Cheater, cheater, your mother's a whore. Beverly gasped. Ben ran up the alley toward Bradley and succeeded in doing no more than tripping over an empty crate and falling down. Bradley was gone, and Ben knew better than to believe he would ever catch him. He turned toward Beverly instead to see if she was all right. The word had shocked him as much as it had her. She saw the concern in his face. She opened her mouth to say that it was okay, not to worry. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And that odd question her mother had asked, Does he ever touch you? Reoccurred. Odd question, yes. Simple, yet nonsensical. Full of somehow ominous undertones, murky as old coffee. Instead of saying that names would never hurt her, she burst into tears. Eddie looked at her uncomfortably. He took his aspirator from his pants pocket and sucked on it. Then he bent down and began picking up the scattered pennies. There was a fussy, careful expression on his face as he did this. Ben moved toward her instinctively, wanting to hug and give comfort, and stopped. She was too pretty. In the face of all that prettiness, he felt helpless. Cheer up, he said, knowing it must sound idiotic, but unable to think of anything more useful. He touched her shoulders lightly. She had put her hands over his face to hide her wet eyes and blotchy cheeks, and then took them away as if she were too hot to touch. He was blushing now, so hard he looked apoplectic. Cheer up, Beverly. She lowered her hands and cried out in a shrill, furious voice. My mother is not a whore. She's a waitress. This was greeted by absolute silence. Ben stared at her with his lower jaw sprung ajar. Eddie looked up at her from the cobbled surface of the alley, his hands full of pennies. Suddenly, all three of them were laughing hysterically. A waitress! Eddie cackled. He had only the faintest idea of what a whore was, but something about this comparison struck him as delicious just the same. Is that what she is? Yes, she is, Beverly gasped, laughing and crying at the same time. Ben was laughing so hard he couldn't stand up. He sat heavily on a trash can. His bulk drove the lid into the can and spilled him into the alley on his side. Eddie pointed at him and howled with laughter. Beverly helped him to his feet. A window went above them and a woman yelled, You kids get out of here. There's people that have to work the night shift, you know. Get lost. Without thinking, the three of them linked hands, Beverly in the middle, and ran for Center Street. They were still laughing. They're always laughing. Alrighty. 6. They pulled their money and discovered they had 40 cents, enough for 2 ice cream frappe from the drugstore. They got ice cream. Because old Mr. Keene was a grouch and wouldn't let kids under 12 eat their stuff at the soda fountain, he claimed the pinball machines in the back room might corrupt them. They took the ice cream in 2 huge wax containers up to Bassey Park and sat on the grass to drink them. Ben had coffee, Eddie had strawberry. Beverly sat between the two boys with the straw, sampling each in turn, like a bee at flowers. She felt okay again for the first time since the drain had coughed up its gout of blood the night before. Washed out and emotionally exhausted, but okay at peace with herself. For the time being, anyway. I just don't get what was wrong with Bradley, Eddie said at last, and it had a tone of awkward apology. He never acted like that before. You stood up for me, Beverly said, and suddenly kissed Ben on one cheek. Thank you. Ben went scarlet again. You weren't cheating, he mumbled, and abruptly gulped down half of his coffee frappe, his ice cream, in 3 monster swallows. This was followed by a burp as loud as a shotgun blast. Got any on you, Daddy-O? Eddie asked, and Beverly laughed, helplessly holding her stomach. No more, she giggled. My stomach hurts. Please, no more. Ben was smiling. That night before sleep, he would play the moment when she had kissed him over and over again in his mind. Are you really okay now? He asked. She nodded. It wasn't him. It really wasn't even what he said about my mother. It was something that happened last night. She hesitated, looking from Ben to Eddie and back to Ben again. I have to show somebody. I have to tell somebody. Or show somebody. Or something. I guess I cried because I've been scared I'm going Looney Tunes. What are you talking about, Looney Tunes? A new voice appeared. A new voice, asked. It was Stanley Uris. As always, he looked small, slim, and preternaturally neat. Much too neat for a kid who was just barely 11. In his white shirt, tucked neatly into his fresh jeans all the way around, his hair combed, the toes of his high-top head spotlessly cleaned, he looked instead like the world's smallest adult. Then he smiled, and the illusion was broken. She won't say whatever she was going to say, Eddie thought, because he wasn't there when Bradley called her mother that name. But after a moment's hesitation, Beverly did tell, because somehow Stanley was different from Beverly. He was there in a way Bradley had not been. But he's not there. Stanley's one of us, Beverly thought, and wondered why that should cause her arms to suddenly break out in bumps. I'm not doing any of them favors by telling, she thought. Not them, and not me neither. But it was too late. She was already speaking. Stan sat down with them, his face still and grave. Eddie offered him the last of his strawberry frappe. Ice cream? And Stan only shook his head, his eyes never leaving Beverly's face. None of the boys spoke. She told them about the voices, by recognizing Ronnie Grogan's voice. She knew Ronnie was dead, but it was her voice all the same. She told them about the blood, how her father had not seen it or felt it, how her mother had not seen it this morning. When she finished, she looked around at their faces, afraid of what she might see, but she saw no disbelief. Terror, but no disbelief. Finally, Ben said, Let's take a look. Or no. Finally, Ben said, Let's go look. 7. They went in by the back door, not just because that was the lock Beverly's key fitted, but because she said her father would kill her if Mrs. Bolton saw her going into the apartment with 3 boys while her folks were gone. Why? Eddie asked. You wouldn't understand, numbnuts, Stan said. Just be quiet. Eddie started to reply, looked at Stan's white, strained face, and decided to keep his mouth shut. The door Sorry, I love Stan so much. I can't help it. Where is he? Come here. Come sit with me. He's right here. The door gave on the kitchen, which was full of late afternoon sun and summer silence. The breakfast dishes sparkled in the drainer. The 4 of them stood by the kitchen table, bunched up, and when a door slammed upstairs, they all jumped and then laughed nervously. Where is it? Ben asked. He was whispering. Her heart thudded in her temples. Beverly led them down to the little hall, with her parents' bedroom on one side and the closed bathroom door at the end. She pulled it open, stepped quickly inside, and pulled the chain over the sink. Then she stepped back between Ben and Eddie again. The blood had dried to maroon smears on the mirror and the basin and the wallpaper. She looked at the blood because it was suddenly easier to look at that than at them. In a small voice she could hardly recognize as her own, she asked, Do you see it? Do any of you see it? Is it there? Ben stepped forward, and she was again struck by how delicately he moved for such a fat boy. He touched one of the smears of blood, then a second, then a long drip on the mirror. Here, here, here. His voice was flat and authoritative. Jeepers, looks like somebody killed a pig in here, Stan said, softly awed. It all came out of the drain? Eddie asked. The sight of the blood made him feel ill. His breath was shortening. He clutched at his aspirator. Beverly had to struggle to keep from bursting into fresh tears. She didn't want to do that. She was afraid that if she did, they would dismiss her as just another girl. But she had to clutch for the doorknob as relief washed through her in a wave of frightening strength. Until that moment, she hadn't realized how sure she was that she was going crazy, having hallucinations, something. And your mom and dad never saw it, Ben marveled. He touched a splotch of blood which had dried on the basin and pulled his hand away and wiped it on the tail of his shirt. Jeepers creepers. I don't know how I can ever come in here again, Beverly said. Not to wash up or brush my teeth or, Well, why don't I clean the place up? Stanley asked suddenly. Beverly looked at him. Clean it? Sure. Maybe we couldn't get all of it off the wallpaper. It looks sort of, on its last legs, but we could get the rest. Haven't you got some rags? Under the kitchen sink, Beverly said. But my mom will wonder where they went if we use them. I've got 50 cents, Stan said quietly. His eyes never left the blood that had splattered the area of the bathroom around the wash basin. We'll clean up as good as we can, then take the rags down to the coin-op laundry place back the way we came. We'll wash them and dry them, then they'll be back under the sink before your folks get home. My mother says you can't get blood out of cloths, Eddie objected. She says it sets in or something. Ben uttered a hysterical little giggle. Doesn't matter if it comes out of the rags or not, he said. They can't see it. No one had to ask him who he meant by they. All right, Beverly said. Let's try it. And that's where we're stopping for tonight, because I'm tired. We'll finish the rest next time for this chapter. And then we're going into all of the adult losers joining forces, I think. Don't quote me on that. Is it? Yeah, then it goes into the second interlude and Mike talking for an awful long time, and then them all hanging out. But that's for next time, and the time after that, and the time after that. So, I'll see you again next week. We'll read part 2, but I enjoyed that chapter. I like Stanley Harris a lot, so that probably explains it. Yeah, I'll see you next time. Hope you all have a wonderful night, have a wonderful weekend, wonderful week. I'll see you guys next time. Well, I won't see you. You'll see me. You'll see my face, which is weird. But see you later. Alrighty. Bye-bye. Stay safe out there.